Okay, hello everybody. How are you all? I hope you are doing well, and thank you for joining us for a great 1 hour with none other than Professor Josef Olmert, a great guy. I'm going to introduce him now, but before I introduce him, let me speak a little bit about the format. The format, I want to interview Dr. Olmert for 45 minutes, so please be quiet. And then after 45 minutes, I will open the floor for questions. And the interview is going to be recorded. We are going to be speaking about future of Arab-Israeli conflict. So we have many, many questions because the Arab-Israeli conflict really has been with us for quite some time, and it involves more than one country. So it's not only about Gaza and the West Bank, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria. You have many things that's happening, and we have really the perfect and the greatest scholar, Josef Olmert, Dr. Olmert. Let me introduce him. I'll ask him the first question. He'll speak for 10 minutes, and then I'll ask him, different questions. Really, first, it's a pleasure to have Dr. Olmert. I have known him for quite some time, and he's a wonderful colleague and a great scholar. Dr. Olmert served as director of Israel's government press office and advisor to former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir during the First Gulf War and the International Peace Conference in Madrid. He was a member of the Israeli delegation for peace talks with Syria in the Madrid Peace Conference and subsequent in Washington, D.C. talks. He also served as a policy advisor to former Defense Minister Moshe Aarons and participated in official talks with senior public figures, including U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and Defense Secretary William Cohen. And let me tell you this, here I am reading for you the short list of his CV. If I'm going to read the regular list of his CV, it's going to take 45 minutes. Dr. Olmert, it's a pleasure to have you here. All right? It's really a pleasure. Let me go ahead and start with my first question. You can take as much time as you like, really. What's your view, really, about what's happening now in the Middle East, of course, with a focus on Israel? And what do you think is going to happen next? Mainly the framework. I'm going to create the context, and you are now to tell us about this. So please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Robert. And first of all, I have to say to the audience that you should be proud, very proud, to have Robert Rabil as a scholar in your university. He is a modest person, but I don't need to be modest about him. He is really one of the best in the world. Listen to me, guys. I'm telling you. Very modest guy, but you should be very proud that he's there and take full advantage of his presence there. Having said that, Robert,
thank you.
Let me start with a few comments that may take us less than 10 minutes or give you more time. We'll see. First of all, I take a little issue with the headline of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I'll tell you why. Yes, in the basis of it is an Arab-Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian, Israeli-Arab, Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli. But in recent years, it has become much more so a religious conflict, Muslim-Jewish. And look at something very interesting that is happening that not always people pay attention to. Who are the two states today that are leading the charge against Israel? Iran, the leader of Shia Muslims, and Turkey, which claims to be the leader of Sunni Muslims. And this is very interesting. I wrote about it already 8 or so years ago. And the point really is that if you look even at what's happened since October 7, 2023, every military clash that Israel has had since then, in all the fronts, 6 or 7 fronts, was with forces that are close to Iran, that were not close to any Arab country, but to Iran. And think about that. Iran doesn't have a border with Israel. Iran doesn't have or hasn't had an history of conflict with Israel. This all started since 1979. And unfortunately, look at the role of Turkey on the other side. And I can go on and on, but I want to make the point here. And why do I make the point here? Because it is becoming, therefore, a bigger conflict and more dangerous. On the other hand, one can be optimistic by the fact that a lot of Arab countries, while formally being reserved about what Israel is doing, even those who are in peace talks with Israel or peace accords, the Abraham Accords, and those who behind the scenes are having talks with Israel, they haven't taken any real part in this conflict. And even demonstrations that were against Israel hardly took place in those countries. So you can argue that parts of the Arab world do realize that the conflict is also very dangerous to them. But the overall Islamic envelope here is not good, is not good. It is not good, and we are very worried about it. Now, second point that I want to make here is, again, from a more general Israeli perspective. I just saw today, as I was preparing myself to the interview with you, I know what difficult questions you will ask me. The latest poll in Israel shows something very interesting. The majority of the Israelis prefer security situation over the possibility of normalization with Saudi Arabia. Think about it. What 7th of October did, and the aftermath of it is, it shook something that already was undermined for 30 or 40 years of relative peace on the borders of Israel. It brought back to the collective DNA of Israelis and Jews, the sense of insecurity, the opposition of most of the world or large part of the world, the sense of uncertainty, and therefore the preference of security considerations over everything else. And I want to make a point here. After the War of 67, it's almost like a funny point. Some will find it funny, but it's serious. After the War of 67, Israel won in a war of self-defense. And nobody should have been anti-Israel after this war. I mean, Israel reacted to an attack, the closure of the Straits, the Suez Canal, Nasser's threats and all that. You know what was the most popular song in the Israeli public after the War of 67? The entire world is against us. Already then, people felt like, what's going on? The Jews can't win a war. They always have to be the poor guys, the losers, and so on. After the 7th of October, it has become a very significant sense. And people say, but look at all those demonstrations against the Netanyahu government. Oh, yeah. Don't mix it up with something else. A lot of people are against Netanyahu government. By the way, many of them are from the right wing. Netanyahu's Likud is not the old Likud. There's nothing between the two Likuds. It's like the name, but not the same party. And many people in the right wing also are against Netanyahu. But it doesn't mean that they don't see the situation of Israel in general lights as being one that was compromised in a very big way after the 7th of October, and add up to this anti-Semitism all over the world. You know, it's my favorite pastime now, but not in a pleasant one, to look at social media, because I learn a lot from it about what's happening with all the difficulties of understanding what social media is all about. I'm so amazed by something which is very interesting, the level of hatred on the one hand, but also the level of mobilization of people on the pro-Israel side, mostly Jews. And I can see how everything has become so polarized and radicalized after the 7th of October. Okay. My next point is bringing it more to the current situation now about Gaza and all that, you know. Again, I'm sure there will be questions about Gaza. I want to talk about the current situation. You know, those who follow me know that I'm not a great supporter of President Trump, not an enemy of his. I'm indifferent. I watch what's happening. Either I support this or I support that, you know. But I'm really a bit skeptical when the president presents this ceasefire agreement in Gaza as becoming a new era in the history of the Middle East and all that, when there are so many and such dramatic issues on the ground already now happening in Gaza, which are having the potential of undermining the entire agreement. First of all, Hamas did not live up to their commitment to bring back all the bodies of Israeli hostages. There are already attacks by Hamas people on Israeli soldiers where they are not supposed to be. And the mass executions of people in the streets of Gaza with no protest, nothing at all happening. Do people don't understand that that means that the monster is still there? that therefore the potential for the monster to strike again is still there. And you can ask, so why is it after 2 years that Israel did not stop it altogether? That's another question, and a very good one. Another point that I would like to make is, again, since we mentioned Trump and the US, about the role of the US. Altogether, the role of the US is always positive when the US trying to use its influence in order to mediate between Israelis and their enemies or adversaries. And by the way, to all those anti-Israel people in the US that claim about the special relationship between Israel and the US, bear in mind that because of this special relationship, the US is the only power. It's the only power that can put pressure on Israel and get concessions out of Israel, as they've already done in this case of Gaza. And what will happen next about Gaza or about the West Bank or Judea and Samaria remains to be seen. But I would predict that if the president will continue his active and very significant involvement in the situation, as he has done until now, I can see some movement that will be positive, that will require Prime Minister Netanyahu, so long as he is Prime Minister, to make some big decisions. And he will have to make this almost like historic decision about, say, the future of the situation between Israel and the Palestinians. Today, or yesterday, I should say, the Knesset adopted a declarative decision, which doesn't mean anything from a legal perspective or beyond that even, that Israel should extend its sovereignty over the West Bank. And you know, the Likud party was supposed to vote against it, imagine, by Netanyahu's orders, and some of them did vote in favor of it. But it shows to you the problem that he may have here. He will have to make a big decision about it because President Trump makes it very, very clear that America's designs about the future of the Israeli-Palestinian situation is not what the Israeli right wing has had in their mind when they were so happy about the re-election of President Trump for his second term. My last introductory comment, and obviously there is so much more that I could have said here, but I would leave the floor to you, Robert, is about the multi-front situation, which where I started. I'll go back to it. Iran, Turkey, and all the rest of it. Even there, one can see rays of light. And I would like, therefore, to present a situation which is not so pessimistic. I would call it more realistic pessimism and optimism. The fact that Indonesia, for example, is on the verge of establishing relations with Israel. I don't know if you're aware of it. Last week, the president of Indonesia was almost ending up in Israel, but God knows what happened there, and it was thwarted for one or another reason, but they want to have relations with Israel. So even that sense about the religious aspect of the conflict may not be total as might be the impression that my audience gets from my initial comment. But bear in mind, my friends, bear in mind that when you are a state of Israel and you have to the front of Iran, you have to deal with Gaza, you have to deal with Hezbollah in Lebanon, you have to deal with the militias in Iraq, and you have to deal with the Houthis in Yemen, and other threats coming its way, all the wave of world boycotts and hatreds and all this, do not hold your breath and expect the vast majority of Israelis to say, you know what, that's what the world wants us to do, we're going to do that. That's not the Israeli DNA. It's not going to happen like that. It's going to be much more complicated. Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for this introduction and for those points. Really, they are very apt points. But I really would like to mention something, especially after October 7, after this barbaric attack on Israel. Really, you have radical change in the Middle East. So yes, the Israeli are worried, but also the Israeli must come to the understanding that they have changed or they have introduced significant, and I call it radical changes in the Middle East, especially in Lebanon and Syria. And these are the two countries that border Israel. Really, you know, Lebanon, Hezbollah has been dealt a severe blow. I know you have a problem, and the Lebanese have a problem with Hezbollah, but still, today, I don't think that Hezbollah is going to pose the same threat to Israel as it posed previously before October 7. And you have Syria, and thanks again to Israel, Syria really is the one that paved the way for the removal or the ouster of the regime. And today we are seeing that you have talks, you know, whoever that expected that Al-Julani, now today Ahmad al-Shara, mainly his people, Shibani, his foreign minister, has met the Israelis, in Azerbaijan, has met them in France. So mainly the point is, when you mention about the Israeli are worried, I think, yes, the Israeli are worried, but also don't the government of Israel see that mainly the regional mainly changes that happen, they are not against Israel. Mainly they are, I would say, listen, what happened in the Levant? What happened in the Levant really very much goes in the interest of Israel. Mainly Israel today is the one that made those changes and has the leverage. And this is why, I feel when you tell me that the Israelis are worried about, mainly they are more for security, I understand. But also I ask you this question. For example, aren't you looking, as someone who follows the Israeli news, and aren't you really looking for peace with Lebanon and Syria?
Well,
I know it's complicated. Don't get me wrong.
The answer to you is very simply, of course I do. It was my dream always to be the first Israeli ambassador in Damascus. When I was a member of the Israeli delegation for talks, and later on some other less official but more secretive but interesting talks as well. Never mind the details here. Of course, I'm looking forward to it, but the element that I emphasized before about the sense of uncertainty regarding security is this element of, as I said, uncertainty, because in Lebanon, we hear talks by the president and so many politicians for almost every community in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which we never heard before, but yet we still see that the Hezbollah is not disarmed. So, we are always a bit more skeptical about that. But if it happens, great. There's no question about that. The same about Syria. I do believe that there is a chance that I will welcome to improve the security arrangements in the agreement of 1974. I don't look, if there was a full-fledged peace treaty with Syria, it would be the best, but it's not going to happen. I can see that the uncertainty about security, just to answer specifically to your question about Syria, will show itself when one of the main stumbling blocks, if not the main stumbling block to the security arrangement with Syria that they negotiate, is the upper Hermon Mountain. Yeah, the upper Hermon Mountain, who would control it. Right. And I don't see the Israelis easily giving up on that. So we'll see what happens. But look, I agree with you. Obviously, that's a positive development. There's no question about that. But that comes back to where we started before. It was a regime in Syria that was pro-Iran or dependent on Iran. It was Hezbollah, an extension of Iran. So when we talked about the role of Iran, here it is. And obviously, Iran was defeated in the war with Israel. Iran was defeated. And by the way, the president of the US stopped the Israelis exactly when they were about to deal the last most formidable blow on Iran. And we both know it. And I'm not sure it was the right way to handle it, but okay, that's what happened. We move on.
All right. Let me take you back to Gaza now. Really, the first stage, I would say broadly speaking, and that you still have the bodies, and hopefully they are going to be delivered soon, and I hope sooner. Another thing now, really, Gaza and Kushner, for example, Jared Kushner has floated this plan, divide Gaza into two zones, and we'll build, and we'll have the Palestinian, and we'll rebuild Gaza in the zone where Israel is to be controlling. On the other zone, we'll wait. And then the Arabs said, and I was looking at it yesterday and today, and the Arabs said, listen, we are worried about that, how we are going to have the international stabilization force. So mainly this is one plan. The other plan, again, Secretary Rubio today, before he left for Israel, he mentions that he might be asking the United Nations some kind to play a key role in the establishment of the international stabilization force. Another thing also, I don't know if you have noticed, and I know Israel knows this guy, and somehow they like a sheikh, PNA, PLO. He's today in Egypt, and he's having some serious talk. Yeah. And he's having some serious talk. And the serious talk revolve around, you know, they say, listen, Hamas, at the end of the day, Islamic Jihad, they have to change, disarm. But then, in order for them to have a role, let them go ahead and join the PLO. So mainly become part of one unified, you know, Palestinian organization / government. So my point is, you have many plans in Gaza, really. And of course, you have the president plan. The president plan, yes, it is short on detail, but also I wouldn't say it's short on determination. I think that I can see the determination of President Trump. I can see that you have now, you know, a center that have been established in what's called in Kiryat Gat, you know, in Kiryat Gat, where already you have Danish, German, UAE, and Jordan. So mainly this shows that the president is really, you know, determined to follow through. Tell me, what do you make about all this? How do you think it's going to unfold? Because I think the Gaza now today is very key to what's going to happen next.
Well, I agree with you completely about Gaza being very key, and I'll expand on it just to mention, you mentioned Kiryat Gat. It's interesting and maybe symbolic in a way, because Kiryat Gat, to those who do not know, has become a center of the Israeli high-tech industry with a huge plant of Intel, you know, the only R&D center of Intel outside of the US, which is in Israel. And it's interesting, therefore, that they chose Kiryat Gat. I'm just saying it to show the other side of Israel, the other face of Israel. It's not just dealing with wars and all this, but also, you know, Kiryat Gat is a good example of that. A nice place. I've known it personally, so, you know. But look, I would go along with everything that Kushner or other people would have about Gaza, but I would add up 2 or 3 caveats, which I believe, again, these are typical of the Israeli mind of being, you know what, we say in Hebrew, kabdeu vechashdeu, respect and suspect. We can reverse it, suspect and respect first, you know. What does it mean, the international stabilizing force? Would you think any Israeli agreeing to Turkish presence there? No, for example, but President Trump apparently seems to be committed to his nice friend, Erdogan, who talks about Israel in terms of destroying Israel and all that. So, you know, just give you an example. And would we therefore be happy to see Turkish involvement in also civilian activities in Gaza and all that? You know, that remains to be seen. The UN role. And now, you know, Lebanon, the best of everybody. Look at UNIFIL in South Lebanon. Why would we trust the UN to do a better job in Gaza? So I will be very blunt here. I will be very blunt here, and blunt in the sense that we need to see the real problems. I don't think it is the interest of Israel to have an international force composed of soldiers from countries that are friendly to Israel, that might be subjected to God knows what attacks by Hamas, and with casualties and all that, the blame will fall on Israel, for example. It so happened about UNIFIL. You know, over 30 years ago, I was an unofficial emissary to Ireland to negotiate with them about an Irish soldier from UNIFIL that was killed at that time by the IDF, and it ended up with compensation and all that. Of course, you know, who would be in the international force? Who would take the responsibility, and who would be ready to do it if Hamas will refuse to disarm? So again, the role of Egypt, I agree, should be a great role for Egypt. One side Israel, the other side, of course, Egypt. I agree with all that. The question really is how we shall go beyond the plans into actions on the ground in an ongoing basis, knowing what are the difficulties that are coming ahead of us. So, you know, you asked great questions. I give you the answers that are not so conducive maybe to thinking that everything is going to be nice, because the experience is that not everything has ever been so nice, you know. Why would it be now? No. The last point here is about the role of the US. I personally, and that's my personal feeling, is that the one problem that there are many problems, but the one problem that really bothers me about the way Trump runs his foreign policy is what seems to be lack of consistency. I want to see consistency. Now America is devoting itself to Ukraine. Fine. America devotes itself to the Middle East. America is big enough to do it. But really continue to do it. Don't be like, okay, I said this, it doesn't happen, so you know what? I'm leaving. I want to see consistency. And here is a point about consistency. The rumors I hear, and you may know better than me, the rumors I hear are that the Saudis, the UAE, the Bahrainis, they're saying to the US, listen to the Israelis, take stronger steps about Hamas, because we don't want Hamas to look like they survived everything. And they also are worried about the lack of American consistency here. So that's a point to be taken into account. And the very, 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 very last point about it. Where is the money from? Who would give the money? Who would give the money? You know, it's a question, right?
Right.
You know, sometimes if you ask the right questions, you might also come with the right answers, but you need to ask the right questions.
I think myself, the money, if you have a stabilization force and Hamas disarmed, and I think at the end of the road, Hamas will be disarmed. And I think if Hamas does something, I really think that President Trump will give the go-ahead for Israel to go and finish Hamas. I don't think, I myself, and I told you that, and I'm very clear about it, I don't think that Hamas has to have or should have any role, absolutely, whether military role or political role, really. It shouldn't be a period in Gaza in the first place. All right, let me move now to the West Bank. And you mentioned something about what happened. You have two bills, as a matter of fact, that were introduced. You know, one bill, and both of them passed, but of course, preliminary. Mainly, they have to go to the, before, you know, they are going to be picked up again.
They have to go through 3 readings in the Knesset.
Yeah, they have to go.
And
as a matter of fact, they have to pass the Foreign Affairs Committee. They have to pass the Defense Committee. And of course, you know, I am pretty sure the Prime Minister is going to stop him. But here again, you know, really, what do you think about the West Bank? And, you know, the question, even in the classrooms that I have, the growth of settlement. Really, you know, I can go nowhere and tell him, okay, look, how many now you have, they are, you know, inhabiting and residing and moving into the West Bank. So what do you think about it? Does that impact in the future? What's your take? You are the one really who knows about the impact of, you know, the settlement on probably the future or no future of the peace process. Really, you know, I think myself, probably sometimes I think that the two-state solution is far from reach. And now this with the President Trump, I think, you know, we'll see what's going to happen. So really, I would like to hear from you.
Let's start by saying, and I should have said it before, because you mentioned the Palestinian Authority, Hussein al-Sheikh and others, you know, I wrote a few years ago an article basically saying even the last resort is better than no option at all, which is the Palestinian Authority. They are far from being good, they are corrupt, they are not efficient, but they are much better than Hamas. Okay, I mean, it's all relative. You don't have options between good and better, you have between bad and worse. And Hamas is the worst, the Palestinian Authority is better than the worst, okay? So they should have a role in Gaza, coming back to what you said before, but now about the West Bank. Look, I wrote, sorry for you know, quoting myself, 11 or 12 years ago, I wrote a big article about settlements in which I took my divorce from the settlement movement, being in the old days a young idealist Likudnik, going to Judea and Samaria. I still believe the Jews have a total right to be there. Those who are there should stay there, at least almost most of them, the majority of them. But I'm at the same time calling to stop the expansion of them. I don't include in that sense the connection between Ma'ale Adumim and Jerusalem, if you know what I mean, the C1. But look, there is no question that the Palestinian Authority should be the effective authority to rule the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza. There's no question about it. I would say yes. And that's exactly what takes me totally away from the right wing and those who are to the right of Netanyahu in his own party and parties, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and all these people. The problem really is again coming to a sense of trust and feeling of security and certainty. At the same time, when we talk about what would be and what should be the role of the Palestinian Authority in these territories, that I already said I'm in support of it, with all the reservations, the Palestinian Authority is doing everything in their power to bring about boycotts of Israel in the international arena, whether it is in the sport world or outside of it, in every possible way. And this is not a good sign about negotiations, as much as it is not a good sign by some Israeli ministers making all those idiotic statements and so on and so forth. So this is really a problem here that Netanyahu as a leader, talking about Israel now, so long he is the prime minister, he as a leader has to make an historic decision. And the historic decision should be about the fact that what he already said, he said it in 2009 in his famous speech about two-state solution at the Bar-Ilan University, the right-wing University of Israel. This is the principle. Now how to implement it in terms of time, in terms of joint authorities, in terms of security arrangements, in terms of the status of Arabs who live under Jews and Jews who live under Arabs. So all these questions are huge questions, but they have to start with a decision. The Palestinian Authority should make a decision. If you really want to win Israeli trust, stop all these activities that I mentioned. And by the way, the participation of Palestinian Authority personnel in attacks on Israelis in the West Bank or in Judea and Samaria. And Netanyahu has to make his own historic decision. Look, Menachem Begin made an historic decision. Sadat wanted to come to Jerusalem. He said yes. He knew when he said yes what the price would be. When I say that Netanyahu has to make an historic decision, and Netanyahu, look, he's a clever man. I've known him for many years. I worked with him, underneath him, alongside him, when he knows exactly what it means, historic decision about Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, as you would call it. That it means that there would be a large measure of Palestinian sovereignty under condition that will protect Israeli security and keep the rights of Jews who live in areas that are historic for Jews and whatever. Hebron, you can't say to Jews, don't live in Hebron. You can even think about it. But he has to make this decision. He hasn't made his decision. And he's not showing signs that he's going to make this decision. Nor do I see, to be honest here, not because I try to balance between the two sides. I don't see that Abbas and the PA are making this decision or going close to it. So I know there is Hussein al-Sheikh, there is Mohammed Dahlan, there are other people, but they're not there. They're not the leaders. And Abbas, I wish him until 120. Why not? Everybody says Abbas is over, he's over. He's there. Everybody is there, and he doesn't show any sign of it. So we need to bear in mind here that historic decisions have to be made, but historic decisions, and Robert, this is the point here that comes back to where I started. Historic decisions have to reflect a very deep sense of security and certainty. And this is where the point about lack of security sense or lack of certainty is so significant.
You don't That's a very good point.
Yeah, you don't expect great points, great decisions to be made when you have so many doubts. So that brings me now to connecting it with what's happening in Gaza now. If this agreement in Gaza is working, it is good to the sense of security. If it doesn't work, it's disastrous. The if stays. I don't know the result of it. You don't know. We don't know. That's the big if.
Oh, very good. Let me take you to Saudi Arabia. You mentioned something about Saudi Arabia and about in your introduction. You mentioned that the Israelis, would like their security more than normalization with Saudi Arabia. But from the leaders of Israel, and especially from the prime minister, he put a premium on having peace with Saudi Arabia, because having peace with Saudi Arabia really is, I think myself, it's one huge step in normalizing relations, not only between Israel and the Arabs, but also between Israel and the Muslim world. You have 55 Muslim majority countries, and now you have Muslims, in many countries, including in our state and everywhere. So what do you think about that? Tell me, give me your opinion about, Israel and Saudi Arabia.
I wish there was peace treaty, but in an ironic way, and this is one of those unintended consequences, what Israel did to Iran in this 12 days war lessens the interest of Saudi Arabia in making peace with Israel.
That's a good point. Apt point.
And at the same time, the pressure on Israel about Palestinian statehood, which, as I said, Netanyahu has to decide about, and I would encourage him to go in a direction that I believe I made clear before, is also weakened his interest in it, because now there is this sense of insecurity after what happened 7th of October. Before 7th of October, everybody said just a question of days, weeks, until we have this agreement with Saudi Arabia. And why do people not talk about that anymore? Because in a very ironic way, the interest of both sides in doing it weakened. Now, what weakened? There's a difference here, and that's coming back to your question, also might be related also to Gaza. There's a difference between a normalization, ceasefire, steps on the ground, and formal peace. Saudi Arabia still maintains elements of normalization, which they already did before, like allowing Israeli civilian air flights to Saudi Arabia, which is very important.
Yes.
They
and
allow
sharing of intelligence, in informal channels.
That's what you say. How do you know that? I don't know, but you know it, of course. Do you say it, by the way, in the Saudi networks when you talk to them? Okay. So, yeah, of course, you are right about it. But here is a difference between that and a formal peace treaty. The elephant in the room has always been Iran. The Saudis, cleverly from their perspective, kept a door open in the last few years to Iran because they really, in a way, lost confidence that Israel is going to pull the chestnuts out of the fire for them. Israel did it finally to a large extent, but not totally so, in the 12 days war with Iran. And now the Saudis feel, I think, a bit safer. A bit safer. They need Israel less. They need America more, maybe. So
no, you have a good point. But let me add to this. I think that the whole Gulf region, they have made a strategic decision that sooner or later they are going to have peace with Israel. This is what I see myself from my contact with them, from reading with them, and following the changes in the region. Look at UAE, and let me highlight something about UAE. When the Prime Minister was speaking at the United Nations, many left. I can tell you this. The UAE at the time, the Emir, I believe the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister as well, they went and they met with the Israeli in the chamber. So even as Arab countries left, or even as other country, Colombia and other left, you have the UAE people came in and sat down with them. I don't know why the media didn't put those pictures out.
Well, the media doesn't do many things that they should do, Robert. The media doesn't understand the Middle East. You know it, and I know.
So my point is, really, I am convinced that, yes, the Saudi don't want to have peace now, but the Saudi really look at it in a different way. They say, listen, that conflict has lasted for too long. That conflict cannot be resolved through violence, through force. That conflict we need, and they really don't care. From this way I hear them, they don't care how much the Palestinians they're gonna have land, whether half Jerusalem or full Jerusalem or have this or have. They really, from their perspective, being the important custodian of the two holy mosques and their position in the Muslim world, they feel that some kind of a solution, and we are ready really to have peace. And why I say that, I say that because whether Iran is weakened and not weakened, my point is probably it's better that Iran weakened thanks to Israel. But the point is, you have today a strategic decision in the Gulf. And the only state I think myself that might be last is Kuwait only. The other country, as a matter of fact, Qatar at one time, let's not forget. Qatar, yes, you have issues with Qatar, but Qatar, let's not forget, during Oslo Accord, was the first country to have an Israeli liaison office. Let's not forget that. Qatar and mainly you have it in Doha and Muscat, Oman.
Robert, I think it was Oman, but maybe I'm wrong about
No, two of them.
Yeah.
I know that very well. No, I know it for sure. Really. So this is why, when I look and I see the insecurity, I really believe and I feel with the Israelis. But also, I really, this is where I would like to see that what they have done, and this is my first, what I told you, they have brought about some serious changes, good as a matter of fact, to the region and good for the security of Israel. This is my point myself.
No, I about the Gulf countries in general sense, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think the decision has been made. And of course, even after 2 years of this conflict, the Abraham Accords are still there.
Still, exactly.
The diplomat, no, I'm totally aware of it and I understand it. And, I see it. And I just thinking that in the case of Saudi Arabia, by the way, you forgot Kuwait, which is out of the equation here. They are totally against anything,
Kuwait, they have reasons. I'm not going to go there into that.
No, I was about to say
it will follow.
But they're not significant, but they are, but anyways, I just wanted to make the point that we don't need to hold our breath about God knows what can happen with Saudi Arabia, which will be dramatic because the need for a dramatic decision on their part is not there, even though the overall strategic envelope is what you described, and I agree with it. By the way, if they really are serious about the 2030 development projects, which include also the huge project basically on the borders with Egypt and Israel, of course, they need to have coexistence with Israel and so on. I understand all that. And by the way, Netanyahu's government, as much as we can criticize, and I do criticize this government on many occasions, but give them a credit, he's really very, very careful. But for a couple of unwarranted statements, he's very careful not to break the rules with Saudi Arabia. And the fact is the rules are not broken, So that is a source of optimism for me, of course. And in that case, I also connected to Indonesia, Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. So that could be a counterweight to Erdogan of Turkey that wants to become the new leader of the Sunni Islamic world and the jihad against Israel. I don't think that he is really representing most of the Arab countries, but fact is that he's talking in such terms, or at least implicitly so. So therefore, yes, better relations all the way from normalization to formal something with Saudi Arabia, I would go along with without any question.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that after what happened with Iran, the immediate need for that on the part of Saudi Arabia is not increased, but decreased. I mean, ironic as it may sound,
No, listen, this is my last question, and then I was going to open the floor for the question, and I'll speak about it. I'll tell them what to do for those present. Now, give me really, I would like to have only one short sentence. Are you hopeful for the future, of an Arab/Muslim-Israeli relationship? And if you are hopeful, it doesn't mean that you are hopeful for tomorrow. Mainly when you look and you say, listen, I'm going to take the long view. I'm not speaking about the short view. When I take a look, the long view, what do you see?
I want to be hopeful.
Hopeful, okay.
I said I want to be hopeful.
You want to be hopeful.
Another one line. Look, being a Jew and a Zionist means that you need to be hopeful, because if after 2,000 years, the Jews realize the right to be sovereign of their land, how can you not be optimistic?
Okay.
That also is the point, time and all that comes with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, listen, please, we're going to do it through chat, huh? Listen, please, whoever have a question, write it in the chat, and I will ask Dr. Olmert. And also regarding my students who have attended, yes, I'm going to give you credit. When I meet you in the class, I'm going to take attendance, and really this is where I won't miss anyone, okay? So don't worry about it, because I read in the chat, you know, one told me that she's there. So don't worry about it. When I meet you next week, Monday and Wednesday, whoever was there, I will be more than happy to give you extra credits. Now, let me see here if something was written in the chat. And go ahead, please write your question in the chat. Let me see. All right, I am here for extra credit. Thank you, Anika. Anika, you'll have your extra credit. Okay. All right, since I don't have any question now, all right, Maria. Okay, Maria, thank you. I know you are here, and I'm going to be speaking about it in the class. Since there are no questions yet, let me go ahead and ask another question. You know, Syria and the Druze, Syria and the Druze and Israel. You know that, you know, what happened in south of Syria, terrible, but you have now a lot of talks about the security agreement, potentially is going to happen. And what do you, and I know, and I can tell you what I know, little that I know. I think that Israel is going to say, listen, I want a DMZ, not only in Suwaida, in Daraa, and a good part of the Golan Heights. Tell me, what do you think about the future of Suwaida, where you have the Druze? And mainly the population, let me put it this way, they are split. Some they are calling for self-determination. Some they are calling, no, we want to be part of the government, but have a good relationship with Israel. And some would say, no, and this are small party, no relationship with Israel. We're going to be part, and we're going to be follow the Syrian government. What do you think about that?
Well, historically, as you may know, the Druze in the south has never been totally united. Even during the big revolt against the French, the Turshan, the Atrash family were rebelling, and the Amer family were pro-French. And the same goes now. And that's obvious, because as a minority, you can see that the question is always, how as a minority we survive? The same goes to the Maronite Christians in Lebanon or other minorities. How do we survive, you know, being a minority surrounded by an hostile, you know, environment and all that? So the fact that the Druze are not totally united behind any position is not surprising. It is their history, and I understand it. Now, look, I think that the majority of the Druze would like to be still part of the Syrian state, but in a way that will also give them the protection of Israel. That is to say, some kind of self-rule within a framework of central Syrian government, with particular security arrangement between the Syrian government, mediated also with the Druze, and Israel. And that is therefore not self-determination on one end, and not complete subservience to the government in Damascus on the other end. By the way, the fact that the Ashara people did what they did in the Druze areas with his knowledge, and I would say with his agreement, that also is one of those things that the media in the West did not report about. As if, like, if you don't report, it doesn't exist. As if when you do report about whatever, so that's what exists. The fact of the matter is that what happened in the Druze area was a terrible thing. Terrible thing. And you know what? Also, by the way, what happened to the Alawis? Well, I can see the retaliation to the Alawis and all that, but all the videos that I see coming from Syria about what's happening with the Alawis are really troubling. Nobody talks about it. And that is, again, a source of concern in Israel. Like, can we trust those guys? Should we trust them or not? You know, so sum up about the Druze, there will have to be security arrangements all over the Druze territory in South Syria that will be agreed upon by the government in Damascus and by Israel, and in the first place by the Druze themselves. I will go along with it.
All right. Okay, I have a couple of questions. I have more than a couple of questions, you know, and we have 15 minutes left. First, it's from my colleague who is really with me here, and he's always helping me, especially, you know, with the AI and with the technical stuff and everything like that. And this is what he has the question. Do you see a role for the Europeans, Russians, or perhaps even the Chinese in the architecture of the peace process in the Middle East?
I can see a role to everybody if they are interested in peace and stability. And, you know, the Russians, by the way, talking about Syria, as part of the answer, they have been on a par with Israel in terms of dealing with Syria for years. And despite all the public kind of verbal denunciations of Israel, on the ground, the Russians in Syria behaved in a very responsible way. Okay, so I can see it. And all, by the way, I remember what President Putin said, why Russia did not help Iran during the war now is Israel. He said, because Israel is kind of special case. There are so many Russian speakers there, and almost like he talked in terms of, we are friends of the Israelis. You know, that Russia still recognizes West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They never withdrew this recognition. So, yeah, the Chinese is a little bit of a different case here because the Chinese are really behaving to an extent with in a way that really surprises me. On the one hand, they are still, you know, vying for a lot of technological cooperation with Israel and all that. On the other hand, they really sharpen the tone against Israel in a way that makes you feel that, you know, it's becoming an unequal partnership. We give them too much and we get back too little, if at all. And that, I don't know, you know, I connect the Chinese rhetoric here and actions to the overall American-Chinese relations, you know, so they look at the situation here as an offshoot of the overall tension with the US and the rivalry with the US, which Putin, by the way, may see it like this, but it doesn't act like that necessarily. So it's different. About the Europeans, look, if European countries like Norway or Ireland or Spain are so anti-Israel, they have no role. If European countries like Czech Republic, Austria, Germany, Italy, even to an extent France still and Britain have a different type of approach, they may have a role. I mean, let's be honest about that. You cannot claim to have a role and at the same time conduct such anti-Israel and, by the way, to an extent, anti-Semitic policies. And if the government of Spain wants to be like that, they're out.
Okay.
Yeah. And the
Fair
German,
enough.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question also. This is from Avidri, I think. Hi, thank you so much. Can you explain again why you think that the PA should be in control of Gaza? Well, you didn't say that. You said they should have a role in Gaza. Yeah. But please go ahead and answer his question.
Look, Gaza, in the end of the day, will not be controlled by Israel, which means annexation of Gaza or Israeli military occupation. It is against the interest of Israel. Look, the problem that was in Gaza after 2005 was not what Israel did in 2005. It is that Israel did not follow what it should have done after 2005 to make sure that Gaza will not become again a zone of hostilities. And they did not do a good job about that. We know it. They did a very bad job. So now coming to the PA should be part of the control of Gaza with the support of the international community, but mainly Arab countries and countries from the Gulf, as Robert suggested. And the fact that they have to play this role is because if you think that there should be a role for Palestinians, who are those Palestinians? It is not Hamas. Sure, they're out. They should be out. So who else? You don't choose here between allies and better allies for Israel among the Palestinians. We choose here between those who are, you know, put it this way, more cooperative as opposed to those who are jihadists all the way. And as I said, the Palestinian Authority will have to change as well. They will have. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Dr. Zach Battat. You know, he was here at Florida Atlantic as a fellow. Professor Olmert, thank you for the very informative talk. With Joseph Aoun as the president and Nawaf Salam as prime minister in Lebanon, could you outline realistic near-term steps to reduce Israel-Lebanon border escalation that keep Lebanon constitutional equilibrium intact? And this is one question. The second that follows up, how might Sunni Zaim networks plug into any verification or demilitarization mechanism that Israel could accept? And what roles do you foresee for Saudi Arabia, France, and the US? Zach, that's Such three questions. Do you still remember the first two?
I hope so.
The first two?
Look,
the first two mainly, what can you do mainly to reduce somehow
I remember
the
that.
escalation on the border,
Zach,
between Israel and Lebanon.
Zach,
And the second question about, let me see here, about the Sunni Zaim. Mainly, he chose the Sunni Zaim mainly to go ahead and somehow, if they can have a process for verification of a demilitarization mechanism that Israel could accept. I don't know why he chose only the Sunni Zaim, because he is focusing on the Sunni Zaim. So can you please respond to Dr. Zach Batat?
Dr. Batat, it's good to talk to you as well. I appreciate it. Look, Aoun says the right words. Salam, being a member of the famous Salam family, says the right words. This is the leader of the Sunni community in a way, at least in Beirut, and this is the leader now of the Maronite community. This is, if you will, a reenaction of the historic pact of 1943. So in words, they are all saying the right stuff, which is the progress, but where are the actions? And look, I want to tell something about the Lebanese. As of 1982, and I had a discussion with Robert about it separately, I think that Robert remembers, I've always had a problem with Lebanese situation in terms of the difference and the gap between talks and actions. and I was the first one in 1982. Look, I'm old enough to say it. Unfortunately, old enough. That said, be careful about promises from Lebanon because promises are cheap. And the Lebanese today cannot expect Israel to do the work for them by deciding, okay, now we are okay, that Hezbollah has come to the point where it's not a danger anymore. When the Israelis will come to that point, it will be when the Hezbollah is totally destroyed. Now, the Lebanese, if they want to prevent it, they have to do something now and don't tell us all the time there is going to be a civil war in Lebanon. Of course, we know that there is going to be a civil war in Lebanon. So what's the alternative? It's what Israel is doing. So the Lebanese have to maneuver themselves in between and at least to show in some actions the readiness to go beyond statements. And this is part, Zach, this is part of the overall sense of kind of cynicism in Israel about promises. Because see what happens. I mean, do you really trust promises or do you trust actions on the ground? So with all due respect to Aoun, and by the way, it's also a big family. There's another Aoun in parliament. There used to be another Aoun as president before this guy. They're not immediately related to each other, right, Robert?
No, they are not related.
So
same
the Salams are
family,
related. The Salams are related. I think this guy is the son of Tamam Salam or his brother.
Nawaf Salam?
Yeah.
No, he's not. No, he's not the brother of Tamam Salam.
His cousin of him or something
No,
like that.
I don't think so. I don't know. No, I really don't know. But I know he's not related.
Look,
he's not related to Sa'ib Salam. Probably distant.
Yeah, okay. But so these guys really need to do something because they are the president and prime minister, and they have to do. Look, if they will not do it, the Israelis are not just going to stop what they're doing about Hezbollah because they don't trust that if they stop doing it, it will be a better situation. It is as simple as this. Now, the Sunni Zaim, you refer to Mr. Erdogan, I believe, right? Otherwise, I don't understand what you meant.
No, he said mainly the Sunni Zu'ama, mainly. He said he didn't mention
the Sunni Zu'ama in Lebanon. Yeah, okay.
The Zaim,
I know. Look, I wrote about the Sunni Zu'ama in Lebanon. I know, yeah. By the way, there was always a joke that I heard about
mainly for the people who are attending.
Zu'ama means the leaders, the notables, the traditional leaders of the community. I remember there was a joke that I heard to maybe a lighter atmosphere about Ahmed al-Assad. She is Zaim from South Lebanon. The farmers, the peasants came to him one time and told him, we need some schools in our villages. So he told them, why do you need schools in your villages? My son studies in Beirut. So, that is how the Zu'ama took care of their people. But, the Sunni Zu'ama, it's a little bit of an anachronistic term now because, it's not exactly the same. But look, the Sunni community, they want Hezbollah disarmed. The Maronites, they want Hezbollah disarmed. You know, also the our own faction of the Maronites, let alone the Quwat Libnania, I mean, the Judges faction, and of course, what's left of the Phalangists and all this, the Shamonites, and all this. But nothing happens. They don't do anything. And that's the problem with the Lebanese. And Zach, you know, they have to do something. They have to do something.
Okay, very good. Okay, I have a question, and this from Stephanie. She's also a student, a great student. And I think I will end with this.
All your students must be great, no, Robert?
With this question.
Okay,
Doctor.
with a professor like you, no?
Oh, thank you. Love the presentation. Given the current developments of everything happening in Gaza, in particular, the beheading of Israeli soldiers after a ceasefire was declared, mainly those who are killed by Hamas fire in Rafah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's up to the people of Gaza to take matters into their own hands, or do you think UN intervention is necessary? Here, let me add to her. It's a good question. Let me add to her whether, you know, there will be a movement by the tribes and by those who are against Hamas, and they are mainly armed.
Yeah, great question, Stephanie, right? And your comment also is important in that sense. But unfortunately, and I have to say this, you know, from the Israeli side, the Israelis did not do enough to protect these people. And the reason for that is that the agreement that they agreed to doesn't allow them to do so. But nothing else is happening. No one else is doing anything. And Hamas was executing people on the ground. And look, this is what terrorism is all about. It's aimed at frightening and scaring people, and they do it. So if that will not be stopped and immediately, not in words and threats of the president or any other one, but in actions, we are in bad trouble. We are in bad trouble. Look, the tribes and the clans or the Hamulas, you know, they are not as strong as Hamas because they lack two elements here. A, they lack the ideological dimension. And after all, we have to understand Hamas ideologically speaks to many people in Gaza who support them ideologically. You know, they are jihadists, they're Muslims, they're devoted, you know, and they have this ideological connection. But also Hamas is a centralized organization spread all over, whereas the clans or the tribes are in specific places, you know, so they really don't have influence beyond their immediate location. None of these Abu Shabab or any of those have influence beyond the particular place where they are, as opposed to Hamas, who has been all over the place.
Very good. Thank you. And listen, I have to tell you one thing, because Zach just mentioned, Nawaf is the nephew of former Prime Minister Saeb Salam. Okay?
Oh, yeah. So,
you know, and a cousin of Tamam Salam.
Yeah,
Joseph, listen, it's time. I thank everybody for being here. Joseph, really, it has been always a pleasure to be with you and to listen to you. You are a straight, really shooter, you know, and you always come up with such always the apt arguments, really. And you have such history because you lived it there, you lived here, you were part of it, and such really, you know, I as a matter of fact, I take from you such insights. And by the way, you are mentioned in my article, which I hope the interviews that I made with you, I thank you for that. So hopefully it's gonna be published. So listen, Joseph, again, thank you. I again thank my students and whoever is there. This interview is already being recorded, and I'm gonna post it on Facebook, and probably I will post it again. I will try to post it on the Chastain Johnson webpage. Okay, here at FAU. Joseph, I thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Shukran.
Thank you. Thank you. تكرم عينك. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Bye-bye. And bye, everybody. And I'll see you next week, Monday and Wednesday. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Professor.
Thank you.
Bye, Professor.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here.
Bye, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. 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 And